Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming to hear my lecture. As you're told, my name is Lee Morgan. I am a veterinarian. My wife and I have owned Georgetown Veterinary Hospital here in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. for about 25 years now. I am what's called a field veterinarian for the Iditarod. So my job is to be out at different field stations during the race, along with another corps of veterinarians to make sure that the dogs are safe, make sure that they are okay to go to the next checkpoint. Dogs that we feel that are not safe to go to the next checkpoint or injured, etc. We have the authority and exercise that authority to take them out of the race. We call these drop dogs, and we will care for those dogs until they can be reunited with their owners, their teammates rather, in Anchorage. So I wanted to tell you about this very adventurous thing that I got involved with, which is, and I was so excited. This is a picture of me at 4 a.m. in Unalakleet, Alaska. Anyway, I wrote a book. I hope that you'll take some time and some money and purchase it. It's about my experiences as a veterinarian on the Iditarod. It's very happy stories, a lot of fun stories, nothing sad. And I just talk about my various adventures, not only with the dogs, but the people, which are pretty interesting as well, who compete and watch and help in this race. Iditarod is often called the last great race. And it is a 1,049-mile race that starts in Anchorage, down here at the bottom of the screen, and works its way all the way through the interior of Alaska to Nome. Now, some of you guys may notice that there's two routes. There's a northern route and a southern route. And so the northern route, the competitors and the teams will go that route during even numbered years, and the southern route during an odd number of years. And what this allows is some of these smaller communities to participate in this this very storied event. Along the race course, there are 26 checkpoints that the teams, the mushers, and the dogs have to stop at. And it's at these 26 checkpoints that I, along with a cadre of veterinarians, will examine each and every dog to make sure they're good, everything is well. And so we will conduct our exams at every time the teams stop at one of these points, such as Rainy Pass or Roan or Cripple. These are some of the pictures of the dogs as they're leaving one of the checkpoints. I put a lot of pictures of dogs in here because if you're like me, I like to see the pictures of dogs. And here they are, happy. They're ready to go. They're well rested, and they want to go. There's a funny story in the book about how I got this picture. I hope you'll pick it up and read it. Anyway, the race starts in downtown Anchorage, and it is a big event. People will line the streets and to watch the start of the race. The Iditarod name comes from, I always thought this was such a nice expression or a nice name for the competition. It comes from the Ingalik Inuit word that means a distant place, and it has another meaning, but I like the one with the distant place because I think that sort of describes what this is. Now, a lot of people mistakenly think that the Iditarod is based off the 1925 Serum Run. It's not really, and I'll explain that in a little bit, but it's hard not to talk about the Iditarod and the Serum Run itself. So back in the day, in between communities, the only way that dogs could get from, or we could get from one place to another was dog sleds. There were no roads. There were certainly no airports, in the 20s. So in these remote areas, dog sleds were the main means of transportation. And the Serum Run route does, in fact, cover some of the Iditarod, but not all of it. It's usually just these northern points here that the checkpoints are about the same. What had happened is that in 1925, a doctor had known that there was a diphtheria outbreak that started amongst the native population. Now, the problem was at that time in our history, we could treat diphtheria, but we needed an antitoxin, and there were antitoxins available, but they were in Anchorage. This was in Nome, and really the only way to get to Nome was through a twice yearly ship that would come up and supply the area. This was a particularly cold winter when this happened, and the harbor to Nome was iced in. Aviation was still in its infancy, and there was a very real fear that if they were to take the antitoxin and place it in an airplane, try to fly it up there, there could be airplane wreck, which happened a lot in the early days of aviation there. And the very valuable antitoxin would be lost. So what happened was Leonard Seppala, who was a legend up there, volunteered himself and his friends who would carry the mail and other things from one point to the other in the northern reaches of Alaska to carry the antitoxin to Nome. And so what they did is they set up a relay system. Now, the relay system started actually here in Fairbanks, near the Fairbanks, and the diphtheria toxin was here in Anchorage. So they were able to get the diphtheria toxin onto a train all the way up to Fairbanks. But here is where it got interesting. What they did is they had the toxin handed off like a medical baton almost at each of these checkpoints. So there were a dog team waiting at each of these checkpoints, and they were passing this on as they would go. What happened is Seppala had started from Nome, and the thought was is that he would come across, intercept the Unalakleet, or Shaktoolik rather, and then bring it back. There was a miscommunication, and the person in Shaktoolik had left before Seppala got there. And Seppala was running with his lead dog, Togo. He came in, they had left on the ice, and oddly, just by coincidence, somehow, some way, Seppala and the other team leaving Shaktoolik met on the middle of the ice. And they were able to hand that off. And then Seppala turned his team with Togo and went all the way back to Nome, a distance right then and there of about 1,000 miles. So it was truly an amazing event in the annals of Alaskan history. And many lives were saved. And this is one of the areas where they have handed off the checkpoint. Seppala went on, and his lead dog, Balto, shown in here, I believe Balto's here, became immortalized. There were a lot of people that helped on this. It wasn't just Sepla. There was some real names to this, people that were known in the region as being amazing mushers and being able to withstand just anything that Alaska could throw at them. Sepla here did most a very long run, as you can see, but he handed off to Charles Olson, and then Gunnar Kaysen, Leonard Sepla was driving. His lead dog was Togo. He handed off to Charles Olson, who handed off to Gunnar Kaysen. It was Gunnar Kaysen who came in with Balto, and so they got a lot of the fame. And unfortunately, and some of the other people were overlooked, which is unfortunate because it was the work of all these people that got the serum to the town of Nome in time to save what surely would have been a horrible outbreak of a deadly contagion. Like I said, they were immortalized and went on actually a world tour of the United States. Balto here, shown here, is actually now at was immortalized by statues. There's one in Central Park. There's one outside of Willow, Alaska. And as we said, movies have been made of him and made of the serum run. And he, as a postscript, unfortunately, Balto and his friends were bought by sort of a circus, a traveling circus, such thing, and not treated very well. And a guy in Cleveland actually saw this and thought it was horrific that these heroes were being treated this way. And he happened to have a lot of land in Cleveland, which was fairly undeveloped at the time. So he bought all the dogs, brought them back to Cleveland, gave them free reign of his property so that they could live out their old age in dignity. And Balto is actually now at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. I've seen him. I went to my undergraduate at Case, Western Reserve University, which is right on the ground, which the Natural History Museum is right on the grounds. And Balto has been preserved there for all to see and all to admire. I wanted to talk to you a little bit. So getting back to the Iditarod, that was the serum on the Iditarod. So first of all, the Iditarod, like I said, not necessarily based on the serum, but it was actually an original idea by the two people. One is Joe Reddington here, and the other one is Dorothy Page. In 1973, they were coming up with an idea of how to celebrate Alaska's admission into the United States in 1959, and they thought what better way to commemorate than a dog sled race, because back in the 30s they would have these races called the cup races, the Golden Cup races or challenge races, went by several names, and they thought that this is what we should do, and we should have a route that would show people or take runners through the entire interior of Alaska. And so thus the first Iditarod was in 1973. And running through the interior of Alaska is very challenging. Competitors face blizzard-like conditions sometimes. It's very cold up there. It can get down to -20, -30. Wind can be a real problem. This gentleman, or this racer, I was going to say gentleman because there's about an equal number of male and female competitors, is trying to use the sled as a windbreak. There's glare ice sometimes. And there's this part where they cross a part of the Bering Sea called Norton Sound. I just want to stop for a minute. It's a little bit out of sync, but you'll notice that all the dogs wear these booties, and the booties are great because they protect the paws from sharp pieces of ice or snow or gravel. This is a picture of a musher. You can barely see her face amongst all the frost. Um, the dogs are, you got to remember now, and one of the things I always like to point out is that the dogs here, the Alaskan Huskies or Siberian Huskies that some people use, the Alaskan Husky is pretty much the racing dog of choice. And the Alaskan Husky is basically a mutt. The rules say that your team's got to be composed of Huskies. And the only thing that defines a Alaskan Husky is you have to have some Husky in you. And the reason for that is because Huskies are very well developed for this environment. They have very specialized webbed feet that allow them to distribute the weight more evenly. Very importantly, they have a double hair coat. They have the guard hairs, which are the ones we see, that are nice and shiny. I don't know, some of you may have seen that on Humphrey, who has some husky in him. What this does is outer glossy hair will shed water, snow, ice. Inside that is an inner layer of down almost, and this traps air and keeps the dogs warmer. This is one of our typical setups here. There I am. This is another veterinarian friend of mine who's also from Virginia. It's Frank Baker. He's a native Alaskan or Alaskan native. And we're sitting beside his sled. But as I said, the dogs themselves are, you know, bred for this sort of competition. So this is not something they just wake up and do, and they are trained to handle the cold, and they are in peak physical condition. So when they're running, their heart rates can get up to 300 beats per minute. Within a minute or two, that can go down to a resting rate of between 40 and 60, which just shows you how athletically trained they are. In my opinion, they're the best athletes in the world. This is a team. Everybody has a specialized function on the team. Now, usually your smartest dogs you put at the very front of the pack. All right, they are the lead dogs. These guys are the quarterbacks. These guys are in charge of the rest of the dogs, and they've gained the respect and to deserve this position. And there's usually the smartest and sometimes the most experienced racers that will go at the very, very front of your team. So we see our lead dogs here, and then right behind them are we call the swing dogs. The swing dogs are there to make sure that everybody's going to go through an obstacle, like if there's a tree in the middle of the way, that everybody's going to go through the same way. That not one half the team's going to go one way, the other are going to go the other way. So like for instance, here we have an obstacle. Swing dogs are making sure that everybody's going to go around this obstacle in the same way. This is part of their training. Finally, right in front of the sled, we have the wheel dogs. Now, the wheel dogs, what they do is they pivot. Usually you'll have larger dogs back here, and they'll pivot the sled to help it turn. And in between are your team dogs, and they're just part of the motive force of the sled. And finally, you have the human counterpart of the team, the musher. And this is a dog that's in the basket, taking a rest. Or sometimes if they're injured or whatever, the musher will place them in the basket till we get to the next checkpoint where he can leave them with us. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Training starts at puppyhood. They start at the very beginning. Puppies love to play. Dogs up in the northern regions love snow, and there's plenty of it. The breeding, like I said, can contain as much or as little husky as they want. They have to have some, but no one says how much. So some dogs may look like this, more like a lab to me than really my picture of a husky, or they may look like a husky, like this one, who is obviously very bored with my photographic attempts. And so we got our variations. And I love this picture. And then we have our, some people still like to use the traditional Siberian Husky. They're not the fastest, but there is nothing more beautiful than watching a whole team of Siberian Huskies running through the snow. Their dogs are, there are customized harnesses for the dogs to allow not allow them to pull the sled without putting pressure points on the dogs. So they'll wrap around and we have the harness. The harness then is attached to what we call the tug line. The tug line is attached to the main line, and the main line is attached to the sled. And this is how the motive force of 16 or 18 dogs can propel a sled. It also makes a very good napping place if you're tired and you want to take a rest. Training usually goes year round, even in the summer. And so some people will use these areas like all-terrain vehicles. So this is something is like a marathon for us. You gotta be trained for it and you gotta keep up your training. Let's see here. Yeah, that's just a picture of one of my veterinary friends looking at a dog. The race itself. Well, the race, like I said, actually starts weeks in advance of the actual start. And what has to happen is we need to transport everybody's food and straw up to every location, every checkpoint. And there's 26 of them, like we said. Each competitor provides their own food and they are marked with their name, their team's name. And these are dropped off at the different checkpoints. These are beds of straw that are made into packs that have to be brought up. And how do we get them there? Well, we use bush planes, and the pilots up there have formed what's called these are private pilots. There are more pilots in Alaska per capita than almost anywhere else in the world. And without the bush pilots, probably you could not really have an event like this because these areas are very isolated. You can see that this particular bush plane is fitted out with skis so that they can land anywhere they need. The trail then is staked out and it's smoothed over with snowmobiles or what they call snow machines up there. That's me with a dog. Prior to the race, there's the mushers banquet and the start of the race. And what happens here is the rules are gone over. And these rules extend all the way back to the 30s to the championship races and talk about, how to handle injuries in the field and what rules are need to be, ingrained into the competitors, the mushers at least, heads about what the protocols are. The same goes for us veterinarians. We take a course every time we go up there. There's a small 3-day course on sled dog medicine because sled dogs are somewhat different than your average dog. So when we go up there, we take a course on how to care for these very specialized athletes. Our concerns, top concerns are orthopedic. That's probably the most common injury we see. Gastrointestinal, just like runners, long distance runners, these athletes are prone to vomiting, diarrhea, ulcers, and of course, cardiovascular. We're always looking for things like aspiration pneumonia or arrhythmias in the heart. So at the Musher's banquet, the position is drawn from the lucky mukluk. That's what that is. And that's your starting position. On the day of the race, the dogs will, everybody comes down to Anchorage, and it starts in the main street, and they'll start arriving very early in the morning. The dogs have all been microchipped, and they want to, we want to make sure that the dog that has been registered is the dog that is on the form. So everybody's microchipped, go through microchip, checking the microchips of each dog. And off they go on the start. Now, the first part of the race is just ceremonial, actually. This really doesn't count, but it allows people to watch. And the reason it doesn't count is because, unfortunately, well, I'm showing some faces. There's this highway that bisects the race, and you can't have 80 or 70 teams trying to go across a footbridge. And the people came up, they tried to figure out what to do about this. So what they decided is that the ceremonial start, the start in Anchorage would be just that. It's a ceremonial start. It doesn't really count. The real start is in Willow. But one of the things that is needed, one of the way the Iditarod raises money is people can bid on a chance to ride in the sled the 11 miles from Anchorage all the way up to the official start point at Campbell Field in Willow. And you talk to some of the people who've gotten to do this, and they say it's the experience of a lifetime. And they're closer to the dogs than the mushers are. There was one thing that I did want to talk about, and I skipped over, and I apologize for that, but we'll look at some pretty dogs here. Before any of this happens, the dogs are all examined by a veterinary team. Okay, so to participate, the dogs have to have had blood work done to show that there's no underlying pathology, urinalysis done that checks, make sure, again, as part of the health check, but also make sure that there's no toxins or there's no doping. And they're also given an EKG. And there's one veterinarian that looks over 1,000 EKGs because there's about 1,000 competitors per race. So this will happen about 3 days prior to the race, and the teams will show up in these dog vans. We'll take a look at each and every dog that they have or plan to race to make sure that they're all fit. And the blood work has already been gone over. The results of the tests have gone over. The EKGs have all been gone over. We want to make sure that the dogs are as healthy as possible starting the race, that there are no hidden problems that could cause issues later in the race. And so once we've passed them, once we've signed them off, then of course they then show up at Anchorage. So excuse me for getting a little bit out of order there. But this is a big day in Anchorage. Almost everybody comes out, as you can see, lining the streets to watch the ceremonial start and get to see some of their heroes up close. The names like CV are as common to the Alaskans as the name Jordan would be down, Michael Jordan would be to us down in the lower 48. The streets, the dogs are really ready to go. They are hyped up, ready to go. And so a lot of times they'll have people protecting to make sure that the spectators don't get in the way of the dogs, etc. Of course, the streets are shut down for any sort of traffic. But then, of course, we come to our barrier, this highway and this pedestrian bridge, and the Iditarod program where you get to ride on the sled if you have enough money, I guess. Again, the dogs, they're pretty excited about this part of the race. I think they enjoy the intention. I think they enjoy the people. They've been waiting to do this, and they always seem to have this husky dog smile that I find so endearing. So the race starts the next day. The official race starts the next day. And this is a shot I took of the Aurora Borealis that I thought was kind of really beautiful. The beginning, it starts in the morning. The teams will take off in 2-minute intervals. So they start and then they will come into a checkpoint. Now, this is a checkpoint here at Finger Lake. And you can notice at the beginning of the race, the teams are going to be coming in one after the other. And it makes a very busy day for our veterinarians here at some of the earlier stations. As the race goes on, the teams become spread out a little bit more. This is a picture of some of the dogs coming in to check Tulik. And I love this picture because to me, this kind of encapsulates what the Iditarod is. It really is a challenge. The Iditarod is its own challenge. And this shows the wind-blown area of what's been known called the bellows. And as the dogs are coming up through the street and coming into the checkpoint and the wind and the shifting snow. And this is a husky, and like I said, he's full of snow now. But these are the guard hairs that will protect him and keep him warm. The race has a few obstacles during it. There can be inclines during the race. The racers will race sometimes early morning, evening, during night. And then they're still even further apart, as we're coming further up into the race, still a lot of spectators will show up, and some of them will hire bush pilots to take them up to see the dogs as they come in. We have a central control room back at Anchorage, and up to the minute updates will be coming in through the computer about race conditions, problems, issues, etc. The obstacles can include, we saw the hills there, the crossings of small brooks, open water, and they'll come in at night and all hours of the day. And so as a veterinarian, that's why we have a team. And usually at each checkpoint, we will have between 4 to 6 veterinarians at each checkpoint so that we can do this in shifts. As the team comes in, they have to check in. Say, okay, I'm here, and we have to sign off on it. The first thing we'll ask is, do you have any injuries or there's anything concerned about? I would say 9 times out of 10, it's the mushers who will point out a dog that they feel needs to not continue the race. That needs to be what we call dropped. And when the dog is taken off a team because of an injury or sprain or something, they stay with us until we can get them back to Anchorage, and hence become what we call a drop dog. This is a beautiful area right outside of Cripple. This group of things you see here is actually one of the old ancient trail markers. The Iditarod Trail is actually a trail that was used for many centuries by the indigenous peoples up there and marked. And so the Iditarod Trail follows many of that more so than the Serum Run. Sometimes there's a lot of snow, sometimes there's not. But one of the things that is common is that the race, as they come into some of the smaller towns, especially up north, further away from the start, this is big for some of the local communities. And kids everywhere are drawn to the dogs. These kids were great. When I was up there, here's the thing. So they were out sledding on this hill, and the TV station decided they're going to put their aerial antenna on the town's best sledding hill. And so the kids are still sledding, and TV guy is kind of yelling at the kids, get away, make sure, the expensive, blah, 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 expensive TV equipment. And I'm thinking to myself, it's like, look, if you're going to put your TV stuff up on the town's best sledding hill, you kind of, that's your fault. That's on you because that's that's the sledding hill, and you should be the one moving. But the children very much enjoy seeing the dogs, and I think the dogs enjoy seeing the people. They love interacting with some of the kids, especially. And the mushers will take time and sign autographs at these. You can see this young man here is holding a silhouette of a husky that he's hoping to get signed by Peter Olson. This was a group photo that I took outside of Shack Tulip. So what is my job here? Well, the veterinarians, like I said, our main focus is the health of the dogs. That is the one and only thing we're concerned about. We want to make sure the dogs are okay to go to the next checkpoint, basically. And so each and every dog is examined at each and every checkpoint. We'd like to divide, what we'd like to do, if it's possible, is to have veterinarians go down the line here. Now we're checking for pulse, we're checking for pulse quality, definitely checking for lungs. We want to look for things like aspiration pneumonia, where dogs may be licking snow and some of it may get in the lungs and that can develop into a pneumonia. We're trying to determine if the murmur we're hearing is a normal physiologic murmur that you would hear from any, like an Olympic athlete after they're done competing, or is this more of a pathologic one? And so that's why we try to go with teams, so that if you hear something, there's another vet, you can say, hey, do you hear this? Does this look right to you? Etc. So here I am, I'm examining the dog's cardiovascular system right now, making sure that everything looks and sounds good. The dogs are professionals. They know that this is part of the race. Many of them are very, very great patients to work for, because they know they've been around people their whole lives. They've done this. They do have, to run in the Iditarod is much like qualifying for Boston. You have to have had a good placing in a race previous to this. So these dogs know what they're doing. They know why I'm there. And that we're just one more hurdle to get through, to get on their way going up. One of the most important things I learned is always so the time is to check the dog's paws. Someone calculated about how many millions of times the paws will hit the ground from a race, from in a 1,000-mile race. So we always, the musher here likes to take off the band, not the bandage, I'm sorry, the booty at the rest stop. And this is a good time for us as a veterinarian to check out the paws, make sure they're okay as he's changing it, so that we're not putting undue stress on the dogs or undue stress on the mushers, who are probably pretty tired at this point. And like I said, we go through each and every dog, working with teams, and then we'll go over our findings with the musher. One of the injuries we see, of course, are orthopedic. This dog here, unfortunately, has a injury to the carpus, one of the more common injuries. And even though it's not life-threatening, almost everybody agrees we will take this dog out of the race, because one, it's going to, even though they feel they can go on, it's only going to lead to further deterioration of that joint. And the mushers, they have a very strong bond with their dogs. And that's one of the things that really struck me when I was up there, was the bond that existed between the mushers and the dogs. And I think that a lot of what happened was misnomers is that somehow that these are tough Alaskans and they don't really care about their dogs. And I can tell you from experience, nothing can be further from the truth. These people, they work with their dogs, they love their dogs, they're very, very concerned about the health of their dogs. And right here, the veterinarian showing the musher that this dog has carpal injury, carpal wrist injury, or small. Actually, it's the other way around. He's showing the veterinarian where he thinks the lameness is from. And I was taken by the fact that most of the time when they're coming into a checkpoint, when you come up, you would ask the proper protocol as me as a vet, come up to the musher and say, my name is Dr. Morgan. I'm one of the veterinarians. Is it okay if I examine your team now? And they say yes. And I said, yeah, is there any issues in particular? And they're the ones that usually point it out. Yes, this dog, I noticed that she was limping a little bit, and I think it's a better idea that I leave her here and take her off the team. Now, once a dog's taken off the team, we're starting with, in my day, it was 16 dogs per team. It's now 14 that start, but once a dog's taken off the team, you can't replace it. And that goes all the way back to the 30s. And the idea behind that is that people wouldn't push their dogs beyond their limit and just replace it with a fresh one. Um, nail injuries paw injuries, we always want to check those. And if we find a dog that is in real need, we can fly them out via bush plane. This is one of the checkpoints. You'll notice that the straw, which has already been flown up weeks in advance, is there. The mush will go in, get the straw before they do anything else. They can be exhausted, but they're always going to treat their dogs first. And they'll get the straw out for the dogs to lay on. They will take the booties off. They go get the water. They cook up the food for them. They find their in the stash there, cook up the food, and they'll feed the dogs. And they'll spend an hour or two doing that before they even think about feeding themselves or napping themselves. This is one of the places I was stationed at. Sometimes you're staying in tents heated by a oven, and that can get kind of chilly at night. Some places, this to me, this was a cripple, and going from this to this was like going from a tent to the Hilton. It's like, oh my gosh, it's actually wood and no wind and all the luxury. Yeah, so this is one of the tents that we usually stay in. What I didn't know at this time, this is my first year in 2012, is we were expected to put the tents up ourselves, which I was not very good at. And we set up a cooker and a burner. And my first year up there, unfortunately, we only had one Coleman stove and one little Primus stove to cook for about 40 people. And the creature comforts are Spartan, but that's part of the adventure. Now, getting back to the race, once the veterinarians have said that they've examined the dogs, they will sign off on the vet checkpoint, the veterinary check book. The musher must present this at the end of the race to show that they have had stopped at a checkpoint and their dogs have been examined. We also can write notes in this if we see something that we're a little bit on the verge on and transmit that way up to the next checkpoint. Here I am at one of the checkpoints. I know this is early in my career because there's only a few patches on my jacket, but we do like to try to get to the dogs before they settle down to sleep. I really don't like to disturb the dogs before, to wake them up and to do the physical exam. It's better to get them before they settle down for night. Sometimes it's unavoidable due to the amount of people coming in at any one time. This is taken out of Shaktoolik, what was known as the Bellows because of the strong winds, right on the shore of the Norton Sound, which is a part of the Bering Sea. And this is a particularly important area of the race because it is right the last checkpoint before the Bering Sea crossing, and that is a psychological barrier, I think, for a lot of the mushers. We always try to do what we call the howl protocol. So these are sort of how we do it. We're always checking out the hydration in the heart, attitude and appetite, weight, lungs. So we want to make sure the dogs are not losing a lot of weight. These guys are consuming rather 10,000 calories a day. We want to make sure that there's not weight loss there. We're checking out the lungs because we want to make sure the breathing is steady and pronounced and that the lungs sound clear. We always check out their attitude. Do they look healthy? Do they look happy? Are they pulling? And we always stick around and see what their appetite's like. And of course, we want to make sure they're not dehydrated. And in my opinion, one of the most important thing is the heart. Not only if there's a murmur present, but what's the rate? What's the rhythm? Like I said, once they've stopped, we expect that rate to be pretty low, around 40 to 60, which is your normal dog that I see, like for today, your normal heart rate for larger dogs, 96 at rest. Smaller dogs, more like 120 beats per minute at rest. This is Andy. Andy was entitled to sit in the basket, and Andy was very vocal. He liked to make sure that we knew another team was coming in and would howl with all his might when another team was arriving. They say it can get pretty busy. This was early in the race, and we call this the parking lot. So the dogs are all coming in. And again, this is why we like to have more than one veterinarian at a station. Here, we usually try to have 4 to 6 veterinarians, and it's still going to take us all day to do a proper exam here. So it makes for a long day. These are just some pictures of the race. I enjoy this picture a lot because to me, again, it sort of encapsulates the Iditarod in a shot. This is early in the morning. You can see the wind. You can see the plumes coming off the snow. The somewhat limited vision that you can have during these events. You can almost imagine the cold there. And it can get cold. It can get down to 20 below, 30 below. And who doesn't like a good snow bath after a run? We will, like I said, when the mushers come in, no matter what time of night they're coming in, or how tired they're tending to their dogs first. This musher here is getting ready to feed his dogs. And then the same with us veterinarians. So we'll take a shifts as we go so that you can get some rest, at least in between when the dog teams are coming in. We also check the urine periodically. This is the drug testing protocol. We always take a little sample. This is the P team, and they will show up unannounced at different checkpoints just to take a little sample of the urine, just to make sure that there are no illicit drugs in there. And this is a picture of a beautiful Aurora Borealis. So I talked to you about drop dogs. The drop dogs are what we term, these are the dogs that we've decided they are can no longer participate in the race. And they're our responsibility until we can get them back to Anchorage. There's nothing where I think in my mind, there's nothing more heartbreaking than when a dog has to be taken off the team. They want to run, they want to be with their compatriots. And you will hear some very mournful cries as their team leaves without them, and they realize that they're out of the race. I believe, as an aside, just for me, I do believe that dogs have a sense of cognition that is underestimated, and that they do understand going on, that it's a competition and that they're out there and they're having fun, and then all of a sudden they're benched. And I think that they get the same feeling as a human athlete when they're benched. So the criteria that we use that we're going to say that this dog, there's no way it can go on, is if we think that the dog's too thin, too dehydrated, if we hear an irregular heart rhythm, I think this is a very important one. If we have a temperature greater than 103 or a temperature less than 99, if we hear it in the lungs, any abnormal sounds that might indicate pneumonia. Red or brown discoloration in the urine, there is a disease called rhabdomyolysis, which is a breakdown of the muscle tissue. Rare, very rare. In fact, I've only seen one in my years, and it oddly tends to occur early in the race. A lot of dogs will have diarrhea. They are allowed to take metronidazole to stop it. A lot of times it's, again, like athletes' diarrhea that we get when we engaged in long distance and events like that, endurance events, frostbite injuries, or any lameness that the dog can't worm out of. So just like us, if you're running and my ankle feels a little tight, especially after resting, and I kind of warm out of it, okay, go on. But if the dog is, still limping, no, they're out. And again, just to dismiss any preconceptions, it really is the mushers that are the ones that are more way more conservative about keeping their dogs at a checkpoint. And I think honestly, in my heart, it's because there is such a strong bond between the dogs and their humans. You could, if you wanted to be, very rational about it, you're only as good as your slowest dog. So there's that. But I think a lot of it, there's a lot of care. Andy, again, because I was just taken with him, I just thought he was the neatest guy. Drop dogs, like I said, they're not fond of being dropped. They will complain about it, but we need to care for them. So generally what we try to do is we will get them out as soon as we can. And so we'll take them out to the flight path after we have had a few, get them into a bush plane, and fly them to a hub where we can get them into a larger plane and fly them to Anchorage. And I was on this flight full of huskies. You can see some kind of enjoy the experience, just like humans, some not so much. We land at the airport here at Anchorage, and a truck comes around and the dogs are taken actually to a woman's prison. And the inmates earn the right to care for the dogs along with a veterinarian until the race is over and they can be reunited with their team. And I was told, there's a chapter in my book that explains this in a little bit more detail, but this program has really helped reduce the recidivism rate of some of these women who have been incarcerated. And it's considered a real extra to be able to participate in that. Like I said, this is us trying to get about 100 huskies onto a flight down from McGrath to Anchorage. So why do people drop dogs? Well, there was a study done. We found that the number one reason that we felt that dogs should be taken out of the race was fatigue. shoulder injuries, orthopedic injuries shoulder and carpal injuries were by far the highest. Them, you need the dog to be eating. If they're not eating for any reason, they've got to come out. They need 10,000 calories a day. If they're not consuming that, and you're starting to see dogs that look thinner, body condition wise, they have to come out. Foot injury has to come out. And then probably the least frequent is arrhythmias and such. In this study, there was only two. This is a close-up again of the vet book, and you can see that we've made marks on different notations for the veterinarian going up, or so that the veterinarian at the next stop kind of sees what we saw and that we've signed off on it. Yeah, and the dogs, as again, the children love the dogs, and I think the dogs love the children. This is one of our veterinarians, and she's actually conducting an exam, and the neighborhood children decided that they would help her with it, and with the permission of the veterinarian, of the musher. The musher has to carry everything he needs in that little sled, and it looks big when you first get it, but everything they need, they have to have in that sled. Water, sometimes what we'll do is we'll chop a hole in the ice, and they can come and get some nice, fresh, clean water from some of the frozen lakes. And again, the musher is going to make sure the dogs are hydrated, they're drinking a lot of water. A lot of times they'll mix it with the food, which is here, and they have to go and they have to find out, where their stash of food is amongst this. They have little burners that they'll cook the food for the dogs, so the dogs will have a nice warm meal. And then they'll feed them. And this dog is actually just has a heat, if any familiar with horses, a sweat bandage on. This she had a mild carpal wrist injury that she actually warmed out of real well. We have this stuff called pink goo, which is an ointment that I'm not really sure all what's in, but it's a liniment that we can put on there, and you are considered a quack veterinarian if you don't have a couple tubes of pink goo on you. And the mushers will always come up and say, "Hey, I need some of that pink goo." So, and it's also time at these checkpoints for them to repair their sleds, and this is yet another thing they have to do other than sleep or rest or eat. TV cameras are never far behind. Like I said, the mushers are real heroes up here. And finally, after all that's done, maybe the musher can get a bite to eat, or maybe even take a little nap if they're lucky. The dogs will sleep curled up. What's interesting is I took this picture because they will actually use the snow as part of the insulation. As this builds up, it creates another barrier that actually retains the heat. And so the dogs will actually not get up and like the dog here and shake it off. They'll let it accumulate because it provides yet another barrier. And of course, it's time to see your friends and stretch out. After everything is done, we clean up, everybody cleans up, veterinarians, all the volunteers. We want to leave the areas pristine as it was before. So we'll rake up all the hay and dog droppings and such. These are some of the pictures I just put in here because I enjoy seeing them. So Shaktoolik. There's a chapter in my book about Shaktoolik, but I have to tell you about Shaktoolik. Every man has his limit, and Shaktoolik, I think, would have been mine. Everybody stayed in this old National Guard unit, and the there was no separate rooms in here. Everything was kind of sectioned off with these like little dividers. So it was loud. The lights, unfortunately, were on 24/7. People were crammed like sardines in there. And what happened is I actually got into a bit of insomnia. I could not sleep, and I couldn't sleep for like 2 days. Not the least of which is because our composting toilet broke down, creating a smell that is indescribable and hard to sleep through. But even though it was really cold, after 2 days of not sleeping and becoming sort of a SOB to everybody because of that, I decided to heck with it. I'm going to go out and sleep because one of the things that we are required is to have a bivy sack. And any of you familiar with mountaineering will know that a bivy sack is a sack that goes over your sleeping bag so that if you're caught out in an exposed area, you can slide into it. And I was so tired. I was so not sleeping and irritable. And I came out around the building, and a gust of wind came out and blew all of my equipment right out here, just spread everywhere. And that was it. I was done. After that happened, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. My equipment's everywhere. I can't sleep outside. I have been defeated. But God always finds a way and sends an angel, and my angel was named Devin. Devin was a native of the village, and I hear this voice come out of this park and says, "Do you need some help, mister?" And I kind of weighed the ethics of asking of a 50-year-old man asking the help of an 8-year-old, but I kind of slowly nodded my head. So Devin went out and collected all my equipment, which was blown, scattered all over here. And he helped me build this fort as a windbreak. And he climbed up here and knocked a big thing of snow in my face. I always remember his expression as I was getting into my sleeping bag, with all my clothes, and then trying to get my sleeping bag in a bivy sack. And his comment was, "Well, you're too fat to get into that bag, mister." So he got up on here to watch me sleep, and in the process knocked all the snow and down my face, and we just laughed. And I fell asleep within seconds. And I always credited him with just kind of saving me. So what I did was I wanted to help him out. I wanted to express my appreciation because after that, it kind of broke the spell. I could get back into my rhythm of sleeping. This is Archie. Archie is the elder of the village, and he's kind of the unelected leader. This is the person you go to, help settle disputes. And so I went up to Archie. I said, I want to give something to Devin. And my brother had given me a Swiss Army knife when we were teenagers. That I'd carried on every fishing expedition with me, that I always had with me. It was very important to me. And I went up and I asked Archie if it'd be acceptable if I would give, Devin this, knife or utility utensil. He said, "I think Devin would like that." And so I did. The next day he came in and we are having breakfast, and he comes in all smiles. He points to me and says, "I watched you sleep last night." I said, "I know you did, Devin. I can't thank you enough for that. And I've got a present for you." And I went and I searched through my rucksack, and these are pictures as I talk about the story, and fished out my Swiss Army knife. And I said, "Devin, I want you to have this." And it's very important to me because my brother gave me this when our family didn't have a lot of money. And I've had it with me ever since I was a teenager, which was pretty long ago. And I want you to have it now. And his eyes, you thought I'd give him keys to a Porsche. He was so excited. I like this picture because if you'll notice very quickly. So that's my story about Shaktoolik that I enjoyed. This, like I said, this is the Shaktoolik is the last checkpoint between. This is the crossing of the Bering Sea and it's a psychological barrier. More to the people than the dogs. As you can see, the dogs are having no problem going across the ice. You'll notice that sled is missing somebody of the team. That's the musher. He's out of frame here, trying to run it down. And the dogs, yeah, we're fine. We're going. Come with us. Not come with us. Up to you. Um, yeah, and just some cute photos. So the dogs then will race all the way up, and they will eventually end under the burled arches of Nome, 1,000 miles and 49 miles. And here's how I get paid. And a nice little kiss. And I was going to take a little bit of time. I think I've gone over a little bit about for questions. But first of all, gotta say thanks to my brother Scott, who is my sister Mindy, who's not in this picture, who been on many adventures with me. So there you go.